All right, this is the answer key to solving equations by factoring. We're going to start off with these three problems here. These three problems are already factored, so it's much easier. All right, so we're trying to figure out a value for x that I can plug in here and here that would make this equation equal to 0. Remember, anything times 0 equals 0. Therefore, this equation will be true when 3x minus 2 equals 0, because 3x minus 2, if that equals 0, 0 times anything equals 0. It will also be true when x plus 4 equals 0, because anything times 0 also equals 0. So to solve this equation here, you just have to solve these two tiny equations. Here I move the negative 2 across the equal sign, it becomes plus 2. Over here I use the plus 4, I move it across the equal sign, so it's negative 4. So one answer is x equals negative 4. Over here, I have to divide this side by 3, I get x. I have to divide this side by 3, I get 2/3. So my two answers are x equals 2/3 and x equals negative 4. All right, let's look at this problem now. All right, we're trying to figure out what value for x would make this equation true. Well, this equation would be true if 5x equals 0 or 7x minus 1 equals 0. If 5x equals 0, that means x should equal 0. Over here, if I move the negative 1 over to the right of the equal sign, it becomes positive 1. And now if I divide both sides by 7, I get x equals 1/7. So our two solutions are x equals 0 and x equals 1/7. All right, when is this equation true? Well, this equation will be true if 2x plus 5 equals 0, or when 2x minus 5 equals 0. All right, over here we'll have to move the 5 over to the right. It'll become negative 5. Over here, we'll have to move the negative 5 to the right. It'll be 2x equals positive. All right, here I have to divide this side by 2 and this side by 2. I'll get x equals negative 5/2. And then over here, I have to divide this side by 2 and divide this side by 2. I'll get x equals 5/2. So our two solutions are x equals negative 5/2 and x equals positive 5/2. All right, let's move on to the next set of problems. These problems are a little bit harder because these problems are not factored. Every single one of these problems have the same steps. Step 1 is set equals 0. Step 2, combine like terms. Step 3, factor. Step 4 is solve. All right, let's start by moving the 2x to the left and the 6 to the left. The 2x will become negative 2x and the 6 will become negative 6. All right, so that's step 1. I set the equation equal to 0. Now step 2, I have to combine like terms. The only like terms here are the 7x and the negative 2x, which we can combine to give us 5x. All right, the next step is to factor this, so you have to recognize which technique to use. I'll be using the factoring technique, trinomial using the product sum game. So first I have to figure out my product. I'll have to multiply this number times this number. 4 times negative 6 is negative 24, so that's my product. All right, the sum is always the x coefficient, so the sum in this case is the 5. All right, now you have to do the product sum game. You have to come up with two unique numbers that multiply to give you negative 24, but when you add these two numbers, they give you 5. All right. Those two numbers are 8 and negative 3. So now you're going to use the 8 and negative 3 to break up this middle term. All right, so instead of 5x, I replaced it with an 8x and a negative 3x. And again, I'm using 8 and negative 3 because 8 times negative 3 is negative 24, and 8 plus negative 3 is 5. Now I have to continue by factor by grouping. All right, so let's look at the first two terms and pull out the GCF. I could pull a 4x out of both of these. If I pull a 4x out of here, it'll leave me with an x, and if I pull a 4x out of an 8x, it'll leave me with a 2. Now I have to pull something out of this group that will also leave me with the leftover x plus 2. I'll have to pull out a negative 3. If I pull a negative 3 out of this group, it'll leave me with the x. I pull a negative 3 out of negative 6. Negative 6 divided by negative 3 is positive 2. All right, that makes my two factors. One of them is the x plus 2, and the other factor is formed by the two things I pulled out, 4x minus 3. All right, now that we have this factored, now we can continue to solve this like we did our three problems up here. We're going to set x plus 2 equals 0 and set 4x minus 3 equals 0. Here we'll move 2 over and get x equals negative 2. Here we'll move negative 3 over and get 4x equals positive 3. So x equals negative 2 is one answer. Over here we'll have to divide both sides by 4, so x will equal 3/4. So there's our two answers. X equals negative 2 and x equals 3/4. All right, let's move on to the next problem. Again, the steps are always the same. Set equals 0, combine like terms, factor, and then solve. So setting this equal to 0, notice the 2x squared now is negative 2x squared because we crossed the equal sign. The 30x is now negative 30x because we crossed the equal sign. The next step is to combine like terms. I can combine the x squares, and I can combine the x. 14x squared minus 2x squared is 12x squared. 2x minus 30x is minus 28x. All right, the next step is to factor this. I noticed that the technique I would use here is pull out GCF. I could pull out a 4x from both of these. If I take a 4x out of 12x squared, it'll leave me with a 3x. If I take a negative 28x and I pull out a 4x, it'll leave me with a negative 7. All right, now that this is factored, I have to set each factor equals 0. So 4x equals 0, and 3x minus 7 equals 0. Here, I'll have to divide both sides by 4. Here, I'll first move the negative 7 over here. It'll become positive 7. When I divide both sides by 4, here I get x equals 0. That's one answer. Here, again, the negative 7 is now positive 7. And here, I'll have to divide both sides by 3, give me x equals 7/3. So our two answers are x equals 0 and x equals 7/3. All right, let's do this one over here now. Again, the first step is set it equal to 0. Once you have set it equal to 0, you have to combine like terms. Here, everything's already combined. So the next step is to factor. This technique would be difference of squares. Factoring difference of squares, one factor has a plus in the middle, the other one has a minus in the middle. One has a plus, one has a minus. This is 2x because that's what you have to square to get 4x squared. This is 7 because that's what you have to square to get 49. This is also 2x, and that's also 7. All right, so we factor this using difference of squares. Difference of squares, one factor is always plus, the other one's minus. This is 2x because that's what you have to square to get that, and that's 7 because that's what you have to square to get that. All right, now you'll set each factor equal to 0. So this equation will be true when 2x plus 7 equals 0, and it'll also be true when 2x minus 7 equals 0. Here you'll have to move 7 over, it'll be negative 7. Here you'll move negative 7 over, it'll be positive 7. Now you have to divide each equation by 2. So here you'll get x equals negative 7/2. Here you have to divide both sides by 2. And you'll get x equals positive 7/2. So our two solutions are x equals negative 7/2 and x equals positive 7/2. All right, the next problems I'll be going a little bit quicker. If you need to slow it down, you could always rewind the video. All right, let's look at problem 7. The first step is to set this equal to 0. You'll have to move 2x squared over there. It'll become negative 2x squared. You'll have to move negative 5 across the equal sign. It'll be positive 5. All right, now that we have this set equal to 0, again, notice that's negative, and now that's positive. You have to combine like terms. These two combine to give you 4x squared. All right, the next step is to factor. This is a trinomial, so we'll have to do the product sum game. The product is 4 times 15, which is 60. And the sum is 23. Now we have to do the product sum game. What two numbers multiply to give me 60, but when you add them together, give me 23? That would be 3 and 20. So we're going to use the 3 and the 20 to break up the middle term. So instead of 23x now, we replace this with 3x and 20x. And again, 3 times 20 is 60, 3 plus 20 is 23. That's how we came up with these two numbers. Now we have to factor by grouping. So we'll look at this first group. What can we pull out? We can pull out an x. If I pull an x out of here, it leaves me with 4x. If I pull an x out of here, it leaves me with a 3. Now we have to pull something out of here that will leave us with the same leftovers, 4x plus 3. We'll pull out a positive 5. If I pull a 5 out of here, it leaves me with 4x. If I pull a 5 out of there, it leaves me with 3. This makes my two factors. One factor is 4x plus 3. The other factor is x plus 5. So now we're done factoring. The last step is to set each factor equal to 0, and now solve each little equation. Here we'll have to move 3 over and then divide by 4. Here we'll just have to move the 5 over. Remember to switch signs. So here we have one answer, x equals negative 5. Over here we still have to divide both sides by 4. We'll get x equals negative 3/4. So there's our two answers, x equals negative 5 and x equals negative 3/4. Let's now move on to problem 8. Again, the steps are the same. We're going to set this equal to 0. All right, we'll have to move 18x over here. It'll become negative 18x. All right, now you have to factor this because there's no like terms to combine. You'll have to pull out a GCF. I'll be pulling out a 6x. If I pull out 6x out of here, it'll leave me with the x. If I pull 6x out of here, it'll leave me with a minus 3. So this equation will be true when 6x equals 0 or x minus 3 equals 0. Here, if we divide both sides by 6, we'll get x equals 0. Here, if I move the negative 3 over here, we'll get x equals positive 3. So our two solutions are x equals 0 and x equals 3. All right, you'll have to begin by setting the equation equal to 0. The 4x squared will become negative 4x squared, and the 100 will become minus 100. Now we need to combine like terms. 5x squared minus 4x squared will just be x squared. 36 minus 100 will be negative 64. Now you have to factor this. The technique you'll use is difference of squares. One factor will have a plus in the middle, the other one will have a minus. The two factors are x plus 8 and x minus 8. Now you have to set each factor equal to 0 and then solve those little equations. Solve this equation, it'll just move 8 over, so x equals negative 8. Here you'll move negative 8 over, so x equals positive 8. So our solutions are x equals negative 8 and x equals positive 8. The remaining problems will be going a little bit faster. Problem 10, 11, 12, these equations are already factored. So you could just set these factors equal to 0 and solve. All right, set each factor equal to 0. Now solve each equation. Over here, we'll have to move 1 over to become positive 1, divide by 8. Here, we'll move 7 over, so x equals negative 7. So x equals negative 7 here. Over here, we'll have to divide both sides by 8, so x equals 1/8. So there's our two solutions. Over here, again, these are already factored, so just set each factor equal to 0. And now just solve each of these equations. Here, x will equal 0. Here we'll have to move 9 over, so 2x equals 9. Here we'll have to divide both sides by 2 and get x equals 9/2. So our two solutions are x equals 0 and x equals 9/2. Let's move on to problem 8. Again, it's already factored. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve each little equation. Here, move 8 over, so x equals negative 8. Here, move negative 4 over, x equals positive 4. All right, so x equals negative 8 and x equals positive 4. Again, these three problems right here are easy because you do not have to factor. The remaining 6 problems, you do have to factor. All right, step 1 is set the equation equal to 0. Next, we'll combine like terms, combine these and these. Well, actually, only the x squares combine. 8x squared minus 2x squared is 6x squared. Now we need to factor this. I look at this and I'm going to use trinomial and the product sum game. So I'll have to multiply 6 times negative 5 to get my product, and my sum is 7. All right, now I have to figure out what two numbers multiply give me negative 30, and when I add them together, it gives me 7. That would be positive 10 and negative 3. So instead of 10x, I'm going to write, instead of 7x, I'll replace that with a 10x minus 3x. So again, 10 times negative 3 is negative 30, 10 plus negative 3 is 7. So I will use 10 and negative 3 to replace the 7x. Now I'll factor by grouping. Out of this group, I could pull out a 2x. That leaves me with a 3x plus 5 in parentheses. So over here, I'll want to pull out a negative 1. That way I'll have a 3x plus 5 in parentheses also. All right. So my two factors are the 3x plus 5 form one factor, and then the 2x and the minus 1 form the other factor. All right, now to continue to solve, you just have to set each factor equals 0, and then solve each equation. Here I'll have to subtract 5, divide by 3. Here you'll have to add 1, divide by 2. So our two solutions are x equals negative 5/3 and x equals 1/2. All right, let's look at problem 14. Again, always set it equal to 0 and combine like terms. Next, you'll have to factor by pulling out the GCF. Next, you'll set each factor equal to 0. And now you have to solve each equation. Here, you'll divide by 4, x equals 0. Here, you'll add 7 and divide by 2, so x will equal 7/2. So our two solutions are x equals 0 and x equals 7/2. All right, let's move on to problem 15. All right, we'll start by setting the equation equal to 0. Notice this is now negative, and that is now negative also because it crossed the equal sign. All right, combine like terms. 10x squared minus 6x squared is 4x squared. Negative 70 minus 11 is negative 81. All right, we'll now have to factor. We'll use difference of squares. So this factors into 2x plus 9 times 2x minus 9. Now we'll just have to set each factor equals 0 and then solve. So 2x plus 9 equals 0 and 2x minus 9 equals 0. We'll subtract 9 over here. We'll add 9 over here. Finally, we just have to divide both sides by 2, giving us x equals negative 9/2 and x equals positive 9/2. All right, there are 3 more problems to do. You'll need to do those on your own for homework.